For over 40 years, Microsoft built its empire on a single, highly visual concept, a user-friendly operating system designed for the everyday consumer. They're so fiercely protective of that flagship software architecture that they actively develop and sell a dedicated product called Windows Server, specifically designed for corporate infrastructure. Yet, deep inside the company's own server farms, a contradiction exists. The vast majority of Microsoft's cloud infrastructure runs on a completely different operating system built by their biggest rival. That rival is Linux. For a company defined by Windows, running their backend on open-source software is a staggering strategic irony. It is the corporate equivalent of Microsoft's CEO typing up internal company memos using Apple Pages. But rather than hide this reliance, they have leaned into it. Microsoft officially developed and released their own custom-built Linux distribution to the public, a massive project that took them 4 distinct iterations to finalize. They call it Azure Linux 4.0. Azure Linux represents a deliberate shift in how Microsoft defines the operating system, prioritizing functional utility over the dominance of the single brand. When you think of a modern desktop OS, you expect a rich, layered graphical interface. Colorful windows, intuitive menus, and visual tools built to cater to human interaction. If you read the technical documentation for Azure Linux, it notes the inclusion of WSL2, the Windows subsystem for Linux, which usually implies the software can support those standard graphical capabilities. But boot it up and you find a stark reality. Azure Linux strips away all 2D graphics, operating entirely through a command line interface. It's a functional regression, pulling the software back to the days of a 1981 DOS machine. But in an invisible digital environment, abandoning visual design is a massive functional advantage. Every pixel the system doesn't have to render is raw computing power saved for actual work. To understand why this matters, you have to look at the physical environment dictating these software choices, the hyper-dense, hyper-efficient hardware racks of a modern cloud data center. Standard consumer operating systems carry a heavy load of software bloat. Graphical recycling bins, pre-installed email clients, and visual animations constantly consume valuable processing cycles in the background. Azure Linux is engineered to eliminate that overhead entirely. By stripping out every consumer-facing feature, it guarantees that 100% of the server's computing power is dedicated strictly to routing and managing cloud data. In the architecture of cloud computing, the most advanced software is the one that brings the absolute minimum amount of code to the processor. Microsoft effectively houses 2 completely opposing engineering philosophies under a single corporate roof. On the consumer side, the priority is broad, feature-rich accessibility. The software has to appeal to everyone, everywhere, all at once. On the enterprise side, back-end infrastructure demands something entirely different: ruthless, specialized efficiency, where brand uniformity takes a back seat to performance. Azure Linux demonstrates that Microsoft will readily abandon its legacy Windows architecture the moment pure, unadulterated processing speed is required. For managing raw server throughput, Microsoft favors the performance of a lean Linux framework over the familiarity of its own internal environment. At the highest tiers of global computing, functional reality overrides corporate ego. The simplest, leanest tool consistently wins.